This is a video comparing these two helicopters. I've had a few questions since I posted a video comparing these with the E160. And as far as I can tell, these two helicopters are basically the exact same thing. Same motor, same design, same electronics, everything. Basically the only difference is the name and the different colors. So let's just kind of take a closer look at that. Okay, if you look at it, controllers are the same, the helicopters appear exactly the same, same kind of battery. The manuals, the covers are slightly different, but if you look, same graphics and designs. If you look at some of the pages, they're very similar in graphic and design, maybe slightly different information on certain pages, but pretty much the same. Also, the controllers will work with each other. So the M05 controller will work with this one, and this controller will work with that one. So let's take a look at the helicopters themselves. All right, if you look at the motor, the circuit board, servos, tail motor, basically the same thing from each other. So again, as far as I can tell, these are just clones of each other. The only difference being just the different color. As far as how they fly, they do fly the same. They have that same auto takeoff and landing and hovering. And they both suffer from what's kind of known as the tail drop, where when this thing's flying, you're trying to fly it forward. If it gets too far forward angle, it'll just stop and then rock back, kind of do that tail drop thing, because I think the stabilization system is a bit overreacts and causes this thing to go, whoa, we're done flying forward. And also, this thing can be pretty helpless if there's some wind as well. It just will not fly forward because it starts getting bounced around by the wind and just sits there and it will float back. But I did kind of did some experiments and kind of figured out how to get this to fly a little bit better as far as better forward momentum and to kind of help reduce that tail drop action. So let me show you that. So what I did, it was a kind of a theory of mine that maybe when that circuit board gets tilted too far forward, and it triggers that response. So what I thought, and it seems like it worked, is I just tilted the front of that circuit board up just a little with some double-sided tape to where it sits up a little higher in the front than the back. So the theory, when it flies, kind of that tilted forward, it's still a little more level. And that does seem to help some. The downside is because that circuit board is tilted back, when you first take off, this helicopter automatically wants to kind of level to about there, and it'll start to fly forward on its own. So you do lose some hovering stability. So when you come into land or you want to kind of hold it in place, you do have to push back or make it try to fly backwards to hold that. But that's the mod. It seems to work pretty good. If you tilt this too far forward, then this thing just wants to take off and you can't even stop it. So don't tilt it up too much. Again, on this one, this seems to be about an angle that works halfway decent. So you're more than welcome to give that a try. And that does seem to help, again, that tail drop issue. And I've also noticed that it'll fly a little bit better in the wind. But again, you do lose some stability. Another quick tip I do when I'm flying it is instead of using the stick to fly forward to control the forward movement, what I'll do is I'll just use the trim setting. So I'll just, when I'm ready to fly it forward, I'll just keep moving that trim setting up until it's moving in a forward direction at a decent pace, and just right up to where it starts to do that tail drop thing and slow down, and then back it down a couple steps. And then just let the helicopter automatically do its own thing flying forward. It's kind of like finding the sweet spot between consistent forward momentum and it suddenly doing that whoa thing. And then occasionally, if you need to, you can kind of nudge it forward a little bit or slow it down, but then let go of the stick, and then it automatically will fly forward and hopefully keep the forward momentum more consistent. If you watch that video I have comparing the E130 to the 160, you'll see that this thing flies halfway decent. It still does that tail drop thing a little bit in the video. I even demonstrated. I was flying it with a little bit of wind, so when it was heading towards the right side of the screen, it was flying into the wind, so it did kind of slow down, do that tail drop thing a few times. And then when it was flying to the left, that was with the wind, so it flew more consistent. But again, tilting that circuit board up just a little bit seems to help that forward momentum a little better. Now, one other difference I've had with these two, I've had this one longer than this one. And this helicopter, I've had some problems with it. The first issue I had was the tail motor went out on it. Another issue I'm having right now is the circuit board doesn't work properly. This thing started flying erratically, and I discovered that it's no longer controlling the servos. I at first thought maybe the servos were bad, so I plugged them into this one, and the servos were fine. So I've got a new motherboard, circuit board on order to hopefully get this one flying again. I did have a few crashes when it did that tail drop thing a few times, so I did break the landing gear, so I did have to get some new landing gears for it. And occasionally I've had these little connector pieces here, linkages, pop off, disappear. You can now find these online for sale. So those are the issues I've had with this E130. I've not had that yet with the M05, but I haven't flown this one as much as I've flown this one. But so far, this one is flying just fine, and with that modification, seems to fly a little better. I also had somebody comment about the tail drop thing and kind of joked that the modification he did was he just got the E160. Of course, this is a much better helicopter, collective pitch, brushless motors, and then just junked this one and doesn't worry about that problem anymore. But before you do that, just know that these two helicopters do share some parts. So your parts, some of the parts are compatible with each other. You know, the canopies are basically the same size. This little tail piece here is exactly the same as on these. The little linkages here that seem to pop off and disappear with crashes are the same on each helicopter, so save those. The landing gear is transferable between the two. As well as I've noticed, it looks like the airframe or chassis that these are built on, they look exactly the same. I'm not 100% sure, but they do look a lot like the same thing. So if you happen to have a bad crash with your 160, you might be able to rebuild it onto the frame of this. So maybe don't junk it right away if you do get the 160. That's one way to cure this flight thing, is just get a better helicopter. Okay, let me see if I can do a demonstration on how this can fly. Currently there is no wind. I'm kind of between raindrops here. It has been raining for a little while, but it has stopped, so there's no wind, which makes it nice. So let's just see how this does. Okay, I believe we are ready. Again, with that mod, this thing will take off and want to go ahead and start to fly forward. So here we go. So as you can see, hands free, it's just flying by itself forward. So we'll just kind of turn around, come back, gain some altitude here. Get some altitude so I can see it a little better. So again, it's just flying on its own forward because of that tilt of the circuit board. So then, to give a little more forward momentum, I'll just go ahead and start trimming it forward till it starts moving on its own. We'll bring it back here. And okay, so there, did the little tail drop thing. So starting to do that tail thing on its own. So let me dial it back a couple steps. Kind of find that sweet spot. And then there, just maybe a little less. Again, that maybe one back a little more. So there, now it just kind of flies, not super fast, but just a little better forward momentum. Doesn't slow down as bad. And again, since it's doing its own forward momentum, I don't experience that sudden stop as much. I think this helicopter would have really good flying potential if Eachine could tone that stabilization down just a little bit, maybe even on the high rate setting because this thing I think this thing would really fly well without it doing that so much, because it has pretty good speed up until that point. And sometimes after flying the 160, if I just need a little gentle flying time, it's kind of fun to get this thing out. Just kind of guide it around, relax a little. And then one of the nice advantages of this helicopter is it does have a nice long flight time. Whereas like the E160 has a pretty short flight time, so you really got to make sure you don't fly it too long and then that thing drop out of the sky and then hopefully you don't break anything. There's a pretty good example of how fast it get going right before it kind of does that. But again, I think it flies a little bit better with that tilt of the circuit board. I had somebody else note that sometimes if you kind of lean it left or right, sometimes that helps that tail drop as well. Again, I'm helping it go forward a little bit, so let me just let it fly on its own. So again, this is just hands-free, flying by itself with just that trim setting. And so all I'm doing is just kind of turning it, leaning it a little and bringing it back. And just letting it control its own pace. So when I'm ready to land, I'll just start dialing back the forward trim setting to slow it down. Maybe even drop it back some, and then we'll just drop it down and bring it in. And then have it do that auto landing, which is a nice feature as well. Kind of bring it back here. Again, that tilt of the circuit board does affect its hover, so it's not quite as planted and stays in one spot. All right, now we'll land it, the one-touch landing, so it just kind of comes down nice and gently. Just got to guide it. And there we go. All right, thanks for watching. Happy flying.